we're and the meeting is now being recorded. Zoom just up. Perfect. I will. Perfect. And I will present. So hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We are going to take a SWOT analysis at QBRs with Jennifer Bleam, the cybersecurity Sherpa, and Alex Farling of Lifecycle Insights. And I am Marnie Stockman of Lifecycle Insights. So nice to meet everybody. So I'm going to let Alex and Jennifer introduce themselves, but before they do, we want to see what you may already know about them. So in the Q&A, apparently, not the chat, since that's not operating properly, the question is Jennifer Bleam a balloon animal creator, or does Alex Farling do face painting for carnivals? So chime in to chat, send us smoke signals. You can direct message, put it in Q&A, whatever you think. Is the correct answer Jennifer, or is the correct answer Alex?
All right, Nikki says Alex does face painting. Nikki, the only one who's willing to answer. Walter says Alex does.
I'm winning. I didn't know
it was a competition. Hold on a second. Gotta cue it up completely. Tim is saying both.
But
I paint balloons on Alex's carnival face. Okay, Francis, Jennifer creates balloon animals. I don't know. I think it's tied. We need one more to break the tie. Come on.
Nobody's going to be brave.
So guys, this is an interactive workshop. So this is our little wink wink trick to get you to type with your keyboard, which you guys know how to do.
There we go.
Anonymous attendees says Alex does face painting. All right.
So,
drum roll, please.
Drum roll, please.
I actually do balloon animals. So I learned how to do balloon animals on a vacation when I was bound and determined to unplug and not do any work. And I was at a timeshare, and they had like underwater basket weaving, or like paint something ugly, or learn to do balloon animals. And one of my boys said, "Mom, I want to learn to do balloon animals." So I did. I've taught, I don't know, probably 60, 80 people at this point. One of my students has done balloon animals on the lawn of the White House. I did balloon animals in Moscow. So yeah, definitely a skill that I don't do a whole lot of talking about, because it has nothing to do with sales or cybersecurity or building your
But
business.
now I feel like when you show up at an event, you're going to be at IT Nation, and everybody's going to go, "Hey, Jennifer, show me how to make a giraffe."
I mean,
we need a power hour at our booth.
Yeah,
I'll
make a hat or a dog or something. I actually have a YouTube video that's set to drop in the next couple of weeks, and it talks about how making balloon animals is similar to sales. And that's all I'm going to say.
I'm already looking forward to it. Perfect. So Jennifer, we know you do balloon animals. You want to give us a little bit of your background as well?
Yeah, of course. So I have pretty deep roots inside of the MSP channel. I ran sales and marketing for a Washington, D.C. based MSP for several years. And then I shifted over, worked for Robin Robbins at Technology Marketing Toolkit, coaching MSPs on marketing and sales best practices, grew one of her most profitable divisions. Then I shifted over to Carver Cybersecurity, and we built a $4 million company very, very quickly when we were then acquired by Continuum. And after hanging out there for a number of months and helping things go, the transition planning and all of that, I started my own business. And what I now do is coach MSPs on selling cybersecurity, marketing cybersecurity, and overall just growing their businesses in terms of recurring revenue, and in terms of shifting the business owners out of the tech role and into a CEO role, and even having the ability to take a vacation on occasion. So that's what I do now, all about growth strategy.
Perfect. And Alex, how about you?
Yeah, so as a 16 and a half year MSP owner, I think I lived in that space that Jennifer was talking about, which was out of the tech role. I was one of those weird MSP owners who started this because computers were fun and cool, but I really wasn't the high-end engineer that a lot of these guys are. So I had to hire those guys. But I spent all of my time in sales and marketing and out talking to people. And it was just what I enjoyed and what I was good at. So I take a different look at the MSP space than a lot of the folks who typically live in it. And that's led me to just found Lifecycle Insights and eventually exit my MSP to put all my time into helping MSPs kind of improve this QBR process that has always been so manual. And that just really pains me and frustrates me all at the same time. So, we've really worked hard to build tools that make it easier for MSPs.
And that's really what brought us together is as we were having a conversation around this, there's a lot of power in QBRs and there's a lot of energy wasted in prepping for QBRs, right? So we wanted to do a SWOT analysis about the whole process of QBRs, whether it's manual or automated. So our first question, we have a poll for you, is why aren't you doing QBRs? And if some of you are saying, well, we are doing QBRs, if you're not doing them at the cadence you wish you were doing them, please put that in the chat. So chime into Q&A and tell us 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 1, they take too long to prep for. That is absolutely how Alex and I met, is he said, like, I spent 7 hours today cobbling together pieces for my QBR. 2, maybe you don't have a regular process, so maybe it takes you 20 hours just because you don't even know what you're going to do consistently and repeatedly. 3, you can't get to them quarterly because you don't have it refined enough to get to them quarterly. Or maybe 4, your clients don't see the value. I know when we posted this in your group on Facebook that somebody chimed in, I don't know what to say, right? That's a fair statement. Or maybe 5 other. So chime in, see what folks are saying.
Yeah, and with number 4, sometimes it's the clients don't see the value. Sometimes it's I can't get my clients to even agree to let me come in and have a meeting and talk about customer service or ticket counts, which we'll be talking about. What should you talk about here? 9 is other. Okay, other. So I have a very different client base. Yeah, so 4 could be my clients don't see the value and therefore they won't even take the appointment.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of you have said other. So Tim, you said other, but you told us why. Nikki, you said clients don't see the value, but then other. Do you mind jotting into the Q&A box what is other? What does that mean to you in your world? So you'll learn we are very comfortable with silence, because if this was a live workshop, we'd be in front of a whiteboard and we'd be talking and everyone would have ideas and be able to throw it out. That's just hard to replicate in a virtual world. So.
Silence is deafening, but valuable.
Good. Okay, so it's not so much value. Nikki's saying they're not easy for the clients to understand. So maybe on the front end, why should I do it? And then you're in the room talking techno babble gobbledygook, and they're like, I don't know what you're saying. So, okay, good. Which then makes it harder to get them to show up the next time.
It leads back to they don't see value because they don't understand it, right?
Yes.
You can deliver all the value in the world.
So we're going to take a look at those statements. I'm going to stop sharing and Jennifer's going to start sharing.
I am. So, yes, I want to share my screen. All right. So can you guys confirm that you can see a SWOT analysis on my screen? Okay.
Yes, I'm going to camera. So you guys can run the show.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to run through a SWOT analysis. I've got the ability to write on this. So we're going to start with strengths. So this is strengths of your existing QBRs. I've got all these letters, QBRs, SWOT, MSP, running through my head. So if I trip over myself, let's blame it on that. It has nothing to do with my smarts or lack thereof. But if we're looking at your existing QBR process, what are some strengths that you are seeing in your existing process? And obviously, Alex, you can ask that question a little bit differently if you want to. We'll wait for a few answers.
Yeah, well, I think I think the big point here is, what is it that you're trying to get across to your customer, right? What are the things that lead us to the table in the first place that fall into this column?
So kind of let me move my mic. So, because once I turn over towards there, so what are we going to talk about? What are the talking points? And so therefore, if we're talking about the right things, if we were talking about the valuable things, it becomes a strength.
And that's really what this is all about, right? Putting this all in the perspective of the customer.
Yep, 100%.
Delivering that value and those talking points.
Okay. So go ahead.
Well, so Tim's talking about access to data and budget info, KPIs and KROs. So, what are the actual things that the customer cares about? We talk a lot about trying to limit the amount of time we spend talking about KPIs, but it's not necessarily for any other reason than we feel like if we're talking about KPIs, we're talking about stuff that's backwards looking. And we really want to make this a strategic conversation that looks more forward. But there are still going to be a lot of MSPs who use a KPI in their conversation, and there's going to be a lot of customers who expect it.
So KPIs, key performance indicator or metric, if you want to say it that way. KRO, I don't know that one. What's a KRO?
That is, Tim's going to correct me because I should know this.
Outcomes, key reporting outcomes.
It's a VCIO term, a compliance term.
Okay, got it. So I put backward looking in red because that is not our recommendation.
Yeah.
I mean, some obviously with some things there are only those leading indicators, but we want to focus on the trailing indicators and the implications to the business, how we are positively impacting the business.
Well, and some of this I think goes to to what some folks already dialed in on, which is they don't know what to talk about, so they talk about what's in front of them. And our tools are really good about spitting out numbers. So yes. I can tell you how many tickets we closed for you last month. I can show you how many viruses we scanned for, how many spams we blocked, right? And a lot of MSPs, when they didn't know what to talk about, they gathered everything they could find that looked like a report. And these are your KPIs, and they carried them in front of the customer. And they had that QBR, and the customer went, okay, that was cool. How often do I need to see that? once every never.
I don't care. It doesn't have any meaningful. It's not meaningful data. It's data.
Now it's hard to get that same customer back to the table to do it a second time.
Right.
So I have a very I'm very opinionated on these kind of things, but I think if you can get off of those topics and onto more valuable topics, you wind up in a better place. So I think another strength that we ought to talk about is the agenda. The agenda is a powerful component. And if you're not using an agenda, you're probably going to struggle to have your customer agree to go to this meeting. If you send them an agenda and say, hey, here's the stuff I want to talk about, and it's not spams and tickets and viruses and these things, but it's a forward-looking conversation about your business and about how technology impacts your business.
And I would add, because it's so funny, because we should have probably said this, but we did not compare and contrast our unique ways of approaching the QBR world. I mean, we've been on each other's trainings, we know each other, but we never talked about an agenda. And I was like, okay, would you send the agenda ahead of time? Which Alex says you do. I agree. I would also add, is there, like, here's the agenda. It's the standard agenda that we always, don't tell them it's a standard agenda, but here's what we're going to talk about. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah.
And that gives the client the ability to understand, oh, I'm a participant. You want my opinion. We're actually creating a relationship. This is not a monologue where you're lecturing me. And then if there are any issues with customer service, this is their opportunity to bring it up. Or oh yeah, I've been meaning to tell you, insert the blank. We're starting a new employee. We're buying a new piece of equipment. We've got a line of business we're going to be decommissioning, like whatever. But by asking them that question, is there anything you would like to add? It's going to trigger their brain to start thinking in that way. And now they're a participant in the meeting instead of just being lectured to.
Yeah, and we actually recommend that you send over some questions for the customer. And I'm gonna throw a doc out here. We hadn't really talked about this, but I'm gonna throw a freebie doc out that we share with our MSPs all the time, which is a sample agenda.
Nice.
Based very heavily on the EOS process, the traction process, but it's really about having an efficient meeting that gets to the end to where you need to go. And there's a whole section in there that's just sample questions for your customer. What's changed in your business right now? That's a great conversation to have. How has COVID impacted you? Is your business growing or shrinking?
Nice.
I want to know before I go to the meeting whether or not my customer has money to spend on technology or whether he's broke because of COVID. I'm going to present two way different things if he had to fire half his staff than if he's opening a new office. So this business meeting needs to be way different if we haven't got there. Objectives and key results, Tim has squared us away here.
Okay. Key result areas. Okay. I'm going to leave it as that key result areas. And so if you take a step back and you look at this like you are the customer and someone is saying to you, hey, I'd like to have a review meeting. Listen, we've all had vendors, and the vendors like to get us on the phone. Why? So they can sell us more stuff. And so when we're the customer, we're like, okay, I'm not dumb. Like, you're going, oh, it's time for your quarterly review. And you're like, okay, Mr. Backup vendor, RMM vendor, Mrs. Security vendor, like whoever they are, you're like, I'm not getting on the phone with you for a quarterly review.
Mr. Sales guy who has an account manager title.
Yes, and it says from your account manager. Well, let's face it, the account manager is a salesperson.
My quota carrying account manager. Yeah.
Yes, so it's not like there's any big secret that the meeting they're inviting me to, it's not going to benefit me. It's going to benefit their bottom line, their pocketbook. They want to sell me something. So imagine if you were a novice and you had never shown up to an account manager meeting, and they sent an agenda ahead of time. They explained why this is valuable to you. They asked for your input and said, what do you want to add to this agenda? I want to make this the most valuable hour of your week. You're like, oh, this is great. And you've shifted how you're walking into the meeting. Because we all do it. We walk into a sales meeting and we've got our hands out, figuratively, like, you're not going to sell me anything. But if we walk into a partnership meeting where it's like, we're going to take a look at things and we're going to make sure you're happy, we're going to make sure your business is moving forward. If there's anything going on, we're going to figure out how we can help. Maybe there's a technology fix to one of your business challenges. But we're talking about their business, which is most C-levels' favorite thing to talk about. They love their business. It's their baby. So let's talk about their business.
Most C-levels are proud people. They didn't get to where they are by not busting their tail, and they want to show it off.
Yep.
They're also very competitive people. So they don't like to lose. And that's one of the things that we've learned about how we present, is that how we present, if we present not about how much money you need to spend, but about the business outcomes that aren't being achieved because of technology, we can really turn the tables. If we present towards their ego and challenge their ego a little bit, make them be a little bit competitive to success around those business outcomes, as opposed to coming in and just trying to sell them something.
So what about benchmarking? What about, so instead of saying, let's get myopic and just look at your business, what if we played on that competitive shriek and said, the most successful businesses invest this much in technology, or this percentage of their profit, or this percentage of their revenue on cybersecurity. Now we're playing on that, like, oh, I'm falling behind.
And those numbers are out there. If you guys aren't familiar, you can go out and read several studies that have been done on them.
So I'm going to list that as play to their competitive streak by leveraging benchmarking. That's kind of wordy, but hopefully, I think that's clear-ish. Play to the C-levels, competitive streak. I know I'm going to bleed into this box.
And Keith makes an interesting point that the discussion of business process and alignment should be mutually exclusive of sales. And I don't know that I agree with that, and he says, shouldn't we circle back to sales? Circle back with solutions. I think there are some cases in which we know the answer before we get to the table. There are probably other answers where the conversation around their business will lead us to a new opportunity where the only solution is to circle back, to step away, plan, put together some remediation, remediation planning or whatever, to drive towards the right solution for this customer. So, Keith, I would say, in my mind, there's room for both. If you've got things that are a problem, your customer's still on an antiquated agreement, they don't have your cybersecurity stack, they're not consuming the right products and services to have a stable environment, that doesn't need to be nearly as much of a conversation as the hey, you told me something new, you're opening a new office, you're getting into a different niche, your business is changing. Those are certainly things where we want to take something away and come back with the right answer.
So I incorporated a couple of those into the threats, right? Like if you are not doing QBRs, then your client is not staying up to date. The threats are growing, but their protection is not growing. Even though there are protection mechanisms out there, they aren't deploying them because it's your job to tell them to deploy. So it's a threat to them, but there's also a threat to you as well, because if something happens, the client is going to sue you. There's also the chance that you can be wedged out by a competitor who comes in and says, wait, they aren't doing blah, blah, blah. They really should be. It's been in the news all over the place in our industry. And so now you're on the defensive to try to explain why that hasn't happened.
Yeah, and you know, the big threat of not doing this is that we've been pitched for years. And I'm going to say back as far as 2008 is the first time I heard it in my MSP. Or it's when we bought automation at my MSP. It's when we bought LabTech the first time. And that's when we were being pitched. You can solve 95% of your problems without rolling a truck. We'll save you the cost of a human being. Everything becomes a trouble ticket. You don't have to go out and keep track of all this manually. But what does that really translate to if I take all the cost benefit stuff out and really break it down to English? They did a good job selling me on my pain points at the time. But what they really said to me was, you're not going to go see your customers anymore.
That's exactly.
You're going to lose track of who these people are. You're not going to talk to them anymore. You're not going to shake their hand in the hallway. You're not going to bring them a cup of coffee when you stop by the office to fix something. Your relationship dies with your customer if you don't go have these meetings. This is your chance to rekindle that relationship that you had back in the day when you could walk down the hallway and you knew who was in each office and what those people did and where their kids played soccer and whose kids played baseball and whatever. Yep. So there is a huge amount of relationship damage that we've done with our customers over the last 10, 12, 15 years when we decided we could fix all this without going out to see them.
Okay, so that's the first level implication. Let's talk about the implication to the implication. So what happens because we don't have a relationship with the client? Well, we get fewer referrals. Okay, so that's one. That's huge.
There's also way less loyalty, so we're more likely to get wedged out, right?
Yep. So less loyalty. I would say we're going to fall off of this, but less chance for collaboration. So I am a big believer in saying, oh, you're looking, okay, Bob, you're looking for a great QBR solution. Let me introduce you to Alex and Marty. Go talk to them. I don't have a tool. I can teach you how to position it. I can show you my agenda. I can explain how you should message this so that you get in the door. But if you need a great tool, go talk to Alex. Well, if I didn't know Alex, I can't make that connection. I can't introduce them. I can't say, oh, I know that two people in my network happen to golf. Let me introduce Sam and Richard because, hey, you guys are both golfers. I know nothing about golfing. You guys are both avid golfers. You should know each other, have fun. I step out. I've now made this connection because I had a relationship with these two people. If I never step foot in their office, I don't know them. So that, and we could continue, like, because you don't have a relationship, not only are you not going to get referrals and you're not going to have their, the lifetime value decreases, but there is also, when I have a relationship with a vendor and something goes wrong, I'm going to tell them about it and I'm going to be gracious about it and I'm going to give them a chance to fix it. But if it's a vendor that all they do is take my money, let's just say Zoom, right? I don't think any of us are large enough that we have a Zoom account manager. Right. If something goes wrong with Zoom and there was a relatively similar solution, similar price, I'm bailing on Zoom. Bye, see ya. But if it's a vendor that actually cares about me, and though people care about you is they've spent time with you, right? Their most valuable, precious resource, they've given that to you, and there's a problem. You didn't answer my phone live. You didn't solve the problem the first time. Things just feel like they're slipping. An incumbent came in and told me you really should be doing this threat hunting thing. I don't think you're doing it. And you're like, yeah, actually we are. But they're going to bring those challenges to you because you have the relationship. So there's a lot more to the QBR than just I'm going to go in and we're going to go over some stuff and I'm going to sell them more things. There's a lot more to it than that. That's not the goal.
And if you're doing this right, you'll have the conversation with your customer where you go to sit down at a business review and they go, oh, you want to hear a funny story? Some knucklehead came by here knocking on the door last week asking if he could have our IT service. And don't worry, we threw him out on his ear.
Yes.
Customers will actually say things like that to you. And that's how you know you still have the relationship. You still are their person. When they've called you and said, hey, we need the passwords to the router just because we think we should be allowed to have them, you've already lost the relationship. You're already losing that battle.
Yep.
There's already somebody in the building looking for, doing a scan, doing a security check. They're running their rapid fire tools in your environment at that point.
Yeah, which is obviously not what we want.
Obviously not what we want.
Okay, so and you may be able to quibble with me. Maybe some of these, threats are really weaknesses. I mean, it starts to get a little bit semantic. It's hard to do in a completely live environment. These boxes are filling up. I want to ask the audience: is there anything you feel like we missed? I mean, weaknesses. It seems empty, but there's a lot to those three words. Like, we're not just going to be talking about tech.
And I think a lot of our weakness spilled over into threats, because the weakness of is, I think, relationship belongs in that weakness category, really. And maybe it belongs in both. The threat is probably fewer referrals and less loyalty, but the weakness is a damaged relationship.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue with you there. That makes sense to me.
Again, we can get into semantics on
yeah, absolutely.
But, I think the one big key point to make here, though, is that these are really opportunities to retain customers. The comment always gets made that the cheapest customer to acquire is the one you already have. I would much rather see an MSP do real account management, actually go out and have QBRs, and to Keith's point, maybe sell nothing. I'd rather see them do that and retain a good quality account that maybe over time they're able to drive the ticket counts down, because we all know when you first get a client, they're probably the noisiest. And as we apply more and more of our secret sauce of our solutions, we can drive that ticket noise down. And now I've got a customer who really has a pretty good profit margin. And if I don't invest some account management into them, I will lose them to somebody else, and somebody else will get a client that's nice and neat and clean and their network's in good shape, and I just neglected them.
Mm-hmm. So you said that was probably the biggest. I would agree. I would say that the second biggest is there's a revenue potential here. And I understand that's not necessarily the goal of the QBR. The relationship is there, but there is some inherent ability to grow that account without spending any money to acquire new leads. And I would estimate it's probably in the 25%, range, that wherever they're at, you can probably bump that by 25%. Not by making up, fluffy, we're going to pretend like we need, but legitimately things that are servers that are aging, BDRs that need replaced, things that are out of warranty.
Well, cybersecurity is now, right? There's a 50% bump in price that a lot of MSPs are putting out just to deploy their MSSP stack or their, whatever their top tier cybersecurity solution is. So, a big percentage or a good percentage of your customers will pick that up.
Yep.
I don't think all of them will. So your bump across the board is probably closer to 25%. But you've got some clients up there that will take a 50% increase if they're in a high compliance, high technology industry.
And I am hearing something new just in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 months that 6 months ago, 12 months ago, I was not hearing. And I think some of it has to do with the pandemic starting to decrease, at least in the States, maybe not necessarily globally, but I think it has to do with the pandemic. I also think it has to do with the adoption life cycle of cybersecurity. But more and more what I am hearing is, I told my clients they needed cybersecurity. I explained why from a business standpoint, business implications to their company if we do nothing. I told them the dollar figure and they said, sounds good. Like, the close is becoming easier. Probably the perfect storm: pandemic, number of threats that are out there. Thank you, pipeline being in the news, and things opening up for COVID and people feeling like, okay, my business is going to survive. I made it through. Yes, I better invest in better security. And so that's very exciting, because most of the MSPs and MSSPs that I'm talking to are not trying to rip their clients off. There are some of those out there, but it's not the norm. And so they have this burning desire to keep their clients safe or to get their clients safe. And so being able to go out, do the QBR, explain from a business standpoint why they are underprotected right now, blame it on COVID. I don't care. And now there's a chance to bring them up, up to snuff and
Well,
better protected.
I had a very underperforming account manager that worked at my MSP who came to me one day and said he came back from a QBR and he was just frustrated as can be. And he says, I just can't do this. I care more about their network than they do. And I think that describes a lot of the MSPs that are on this call and a lot of the MSPs that I know in the space and in the industry. And you've got to take the step back to look at this from an objective angle. We can't care more about their network than they do. We might, but we have to find a way to turn that off. And we have to find a way to step back and look at this from an objective point of view and just explain to the client that, if they're not following our best practices, there are outcomes that are going to happen that are less than desirable.
Yes.
Whether it be security, stability, reliability, all of those things will be impacted along the way.
I agree, but I'm going to shift that a little bit though. And sometimes what I hear is that the clients don't care about technology, and they don't care about a BDR. They don't care about machine learning and blah, 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 but they do care about their companies. So I was talking to an MSP that I was supporting years ago, and one of his biggest clients was a salon and spa, like very large hair, nails, massage, 2 stories, massive building. And he was trying unsuccessfully to get them to buy a BDR. So this has probably been 7 years ago. And it was like the 3rd try. They're like, we're not interested. We're good. Don't you remember you sold us that server? And he's like, sure. But what happens if your server goes down? They're like, we'll be fine. And he's like, okay, so if I walked over there and I unplugged your server right now, everything would be fine. And they're like, sure. So he realized, okay, there's a massive disconnect because you wouldn't be okay. And he said, so can we just talk for a couple of minutes? And so he's talking to the owner and he's like, so your computers go down. What are you going to do? They're like, well, he's like, can you bill them? He's like, you've got people sitting under the dryer. Can you bill them? No. Like, what about the people that are due to come in the door in an hour and you have no internet? Like, what do you mean we don't have any internet? No, like the internet, it's all bundled up in that box in the closet where you just said you didn't care if all that got, burnt up or exploded or whatever he said. Like, so we don't have internet? He's like, no. Well, we would just call those customers and tell them they're going to have to come in tomorrow. He's like, which customers? Like, well, we just pull it up on our CRM. Do you mean the CRM that's in the cloud? Like, oh, we can't get to that if our server and internet are not? Nope. Well, we would just call them. How are you going to find their phone numbers? Who are you going to call? How are you going to call them? How are you going to call the people how are you going to bill them? How are you, like, all of a sudden they're like, wait a second, how are you going to answer your phones? And all of a sudden they're like, all that is in that closet? He's like, uh-huh. And it's not protected? Mm-mm. Okay, how much is that BBD thingy you just talked about, right? So yeah. He could have very easily walked out and said the client doesn't care about their server. You're right, they don't, but they care about, and so he was savvy enough to say, I need to explain to you how this is going to impact your business. Now, took him, several years to get to that point.
But that's the whole point around business outcomes and making sure that we're talking about those outcomes from the beginning and not leading with the BDR thingy, right?
Yes.
Because if we're just talking about the BDR thingy, we lose already.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to throw myself under the bus. My husband's been telling me I should get another backup thing for because I'm not technical, like the backup thing, so that when the power goes out, I don't lose power, right? My laptop keeps working magically. And I'm just like, I don't know, the last time I had one, like it beeped and I didn't like it. And I kept stubbing my toe on it. And he kept saying, you want the backup thingy? And I'm like, no. Well, guess what? Last night, I'm doing a webinar with 75 people on the webinar, and we have a massive storm roll in. Yeah. And my picture went, and then it came back. And I mean, I was a split second away from losing all things related to my laptop.
Yeah.
And my husband, God love him, said, that's why I've been saying you need a new backup thingy. And I'm sure he didn't call it a backup thingy. He knows the right name. I don't. But I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me if you're ever on a webinar with 70 people? And he's like, really? And I'm like, I probably could have taken the time to think that through, but I was just like, it's a thing. I got to buy it and install it and the wires and the whatever. He's like, and I would have done all that for you. And I'm like, yeah,
his sales pitch isn't very good.
Yeah, his sales. I'll tell him, honey, your sales. No, I'm not going to tell him that. That would not be a fun conversation.
Right.
So, but that's the whole thing, is that sometimes we speak technical, and the clients are not technical. That's why they have us. So.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to shift to, I mean, this is probably not 100% exhausted, but I want to shift to what it would look like, what we need to have in place to have a system, have a QBR system that actually works. So one of the things that you already shared is having a valid agenda, an agenda that shows the value. And I should have apologized up front about my horrible handwriting. It's not the easiest thing to do on a screen.
Encryption right there.
Yeah. You have to have the code in order
to all things. Yes,
exactly. So an agenda that shows the value, an agenda that I'm going to say pulls them in, makes them want to actually show up, and they don't necessarily want to cancel the appointment. So I'll tell him how to sell to me better. He can offset what he charges to install the battery backup. I love it. Okay, so shows the value. I'm just going to say encourages them to show up.
This is really, and what we talk about in the agenda is WIFM. And if you're not familiar with the WIFM, it's from your customer, right? What's in it for me?
Yes.
And there should be enough questions around your agenda that drive the customer to realize what's in it for them to show up.
I love it. And then I am also going to say the agenda to keep everybody on track. Oh, hold on. There we go. And by everybody, I mean the wordy salespeople.
My bad.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. All right, keep everyone on track. Okay.
And on our sample agenda, you guys will notice we actually put this section is going to take 5 minutes. This section is going to take 15 minutes. And that is to help you keep on track. It's free, so your customer realizes that this is not a never-ending meeting, but it's also to keep you on track and give you a little bit of sanity.
I love it, which is totally a play from EOS, right? That's the whole EOS agenda.
I didn't think it up. I'm just the dumb sales guy.
No, hey, rip and replace, swipe and deploy, whatever
Yep.
we want to call it. Okay.
Yep.
So we have an agenda, then we need a process or an SOP or whatever we want to call it, a process, SOP, checklist, so that, and the goal of this is to make it as fast as possible, as easy as possible, and I'm going to say impossible, maybe relatively impossible to screw up. We'll keep it. We'll go to mess up, in case my children walk in the door and that they would totally call me on the carpet, because they're not allowed to say that. I can, because I'm an adult. So a process, an SOP, just like any other SOP, do this first, do this next, then do this. How is it going to, if you're going to present something physical, is it going to be bound? Is it going to be, is there a cover page? What's our standard? How do we present this? Yes.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
We did them for years, and all that binding stuff, you guys can buy all of that off of Staples or Amazon for less than $100.
Yeah.
It is the cheapest improvement of your appearance you could possibly pick up.
Which is then a system.
Yep.
Because systems don't get tired, people get tired. So follow a system. So Alex, how much of this is something that you could outsource or hand to somebody else, as opposed to it being something that the account manager or the owner has to do themselves?
Well, I think there's a difference between outsource and handoff, right? I think it's something that has to happen inside your organization.
Sure.
It's really, really hard for someone who hasn't been involved to do all of this. At my MSP, we had non-technical account managers do a good bit of it. We also had tier 1 engineers and interns do a good bit of it, because once you build a process, you can hand it off. If you can't hand it off, I question your process.
Yes.
And there are some times where you have a good process and it just requires that one special touch that only the account manager can do, or only the VCIO or the senior network voodoo guy can pull off. But in most cases, if you have a good process, you can start to delegate it. And we have a partner at Lifecycle Insights who will schedule 2 to 3 QBRs a day to present. His intern and his office manager literally hand him the documentation 15 minutes ahead of time and tell him what he's going to be talking about, what he's going to do. And he has it so systematized that he says, I got 4 QBR days a month, and I do 12 QBRs a month, and just bang, 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 and he just knocks them out. And you know, this is, and if you're saying my account manager's not technical, they couldn't possibly do this, whatever, we'll call you on it. Your account manager can do more of it than you think if you enable them with the right system, and they're only a team's call away from the technician who runs that account to spend 15 minutes answering the couple of things they couldn't. And that's what we did at my MSP. Our non-technical account manager took it as far as they could. They stopped, scheduled a meeting with the tech who's most familiar with the account. They carried the rest of it forward with, you know, got somebody to help carry the water after that point.
I love it. Okay, so I want to open this up to the audience as well, because I know we've been chatting back and forth a lot, and I've seen questions and answers coming in. So if you had this, like if you had an agenda, which you've already got the template agenda that Alex shared, and thank you so much for doing that. That's awesome. If you had a process, an SOP, a checklist, what else other than what's on the screen right now, what else would you be missing? Like let's wave that magic wand, make us work, make us create something new, or tell us we missed a piece of the puzzle. See, we're both super comfortable just sitting and waiting.
I can hear the keystrokes. Somebody's over there, click, 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 click.
Yeah.
There's some people that know the answer to this, because I know that there's a couple of people in here who just left a class that I taught from 2 to 3 today that answered this question. So I'm sure that there's folks out there, Tim's one of them, who we know the answer.
That's okay. Share the answer that you know.
Nobody's going to speak. They're going to make me do it all.
It looks like it. Man, it's so funny when we went from using chat, because I really feel like if we had chat enabled, which we can't help, Zoom broke something, I feel like the chat would just be flying by, but there's something intimidating about the Q&A, or that isn't as comfortable. So
that's okay. So I'll start. I'll throw a softball out here. I think we need to do something to assess current state versus best practices. And we call it a risk assessment at Lifecycle Insights. You can call it whatever you want. But you've got to have some sort of a conversation around where you are today, what your status quo is, versus what the industry says it ought to be, what your MSP standards say it ought to be. You know, are they running your favorite firewall that you can troubleshoot easily, or are they plugged straight into a cable modem, or do they have the next best firewall, but you guys don't know how to support it?
Yep. So I call it the 3 W's. Where are you now? Where should you be? And how do we get there? What's the bottleneck? That's the third W, is what's the bottleneck? And
it's usually the customer's checkbook, but you know.
Yeah. I just want to put that W there because that's what I call it, is the.
Yep.
So how do we get there? How do we bridge the gap? There we go. And I'm going to do this plug for this sales book that I absolutely love. It is Gap Selling. It's really written for an enterprise salesperson. And so really there's probably 20% of it that doesn't apply to MSPs. And it's not an MSP sales manual by any stretch, but it's such a great sales book because it's all based on the gap. Here's where you are now. Here's where you should be. How do we bridge the gap? It builds in implications and outcomes to the business, both positive and negative. It is a fantastic book. Someday I'm going to meet the author. He doesn't know that yet, but someday I'm going to meet the author because I'm a huge fan. I base my MSP sales methodology on that book largely, and question-based selling and a million other books, but it visually is a great framework.
It's funny because we get our heads wrapped so tightly around what framework you're using. But what I just heard you say was you've learned from a couple of books, then you've built your own framework.
Yeah.
And somebody literally just called me out on Facebook today and said, that's a Sandler sales methodology. And I went, I've studied Sandler. He's top of the industry. And I've taken what I like from it and I use it regularly. And some of the stuff I look at and go, that's corny and I can't hear it coming out of my mouth. So I'm going to say what is authentic to me.
Yes.
And try and get to the same result.
And it's so interesting because sometimes I can remember, oh, I learned that in Sandler, or oh, I went to Chartech Sales
Sometimes
Lab.
you've been doing it so long you don't remember.
Then it's like I'm 100% confident I did not create this myself, but I don't know where I learned it. I've read 200 sales books and attended thousands of hours of sales training, and closed millions of dollars in sales. I don't know, but I know
nothing new has been created in sales in 2000 years. So
no, and it's, I mean, Sandler is question-based selling, which is, I mean, you know, it doesn't matter. It all is very, very similar. It's human relationship. It's understanding human psychology. You know, there's some books that are more advanced than others.
Yep.
Anyway, but this is not a, hey, let's talk about sales books, although we could probably do an hour.
Do that for an hour too. We could do an hour on that.
Oh man.
So we've got our process, we've got our checklist of some sort. We've added kind of a discovery method or a presentation. This is the center of my universe when I do these, right? The assessment is kind of the big piece that shows it all. You want to throw us another component that you like to fit in yours?
You've got to have a sales process, even if it's not, and so kind of the 3 W's is the sales process, but you have to go in with the mindset that while you are building a relationship and while you are giving them business implications, this is ultimately a sales process, a sales meeting. And by that, I mean, it is about control. You have to control the narrative. You need to know what is that next step. So if you look at this as sales, this is a sales call. And so
sometimes what you're selling doesn't even cost the customer anything. I think this is important to point out, right? We all want our customers to take on Microsoft multi-factor authentication throughout Office 365, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you have to sell them on the why, even though the product is free.
Yep.
So don't get hung up on this is a sales meeting just because we're talking about sales. You can walk out of one of these without having closed $1 in business, and it still be a relatively productive meeting if you've improved the relationship, improved the security stature, given them more stability or reliability in their network, done something that advances the relationship forward. It leads to more sales of products and services and other things later.
Yes, and I would even argue that there should be those sales calls where you're not selling them anything. You're not giving them anything that costs them money. You're increasing your value because you just made them more secure. And it's fun when they say, how much is that going to cost me? And you're like, nothing. We're going to roll it out.
Right. Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, it's not always about my Maserati payment.
Yes, exactly. I love it. Yeah. And then when you do that, you're cementing that relationship. You're growing that relationship. You're building into you're adding into that relationship.
Yep. And Jennifer, you've got a request for the link to the book you shared, so you're going to have to dig that up before we get off the call here.
All right, so leave that up there because I think I'm about to stop sharing my screen, and then Marty can take over, I believe.
I'm going to throw one more thing in here on the sales piece, though, and what I call this is remediation planning. Right? We know we identified a problem. You can call it the sales call. You can call it remediation planning. Remediation planning, in my mind, usually ends with the cha-ching of the cash register because a lot of the solutions cost money. But this is the remediation piece of the cycle. And the last piece that I really like to throw into every QBR is a budget. I feel like if you don't deliver your customer a budget, then they're building one in their head. And I promise you theirs has fewer zeros in it than it should. And the conversation was mentioned earlier about what percentage of money they should be spending in IT. You probably need to tell them that.
Yes.
So I'm a huge fan of the budget. I found that it made selling a whole lot easier, and it lets you see down the road and around corners and play canary in the coal mine. So there's no knock knock. Windows 7's dead. I need $20,000. Here's the invoice. That's
right. I think that's critical. It's not a budget just for today and just for this quarter. Hey, let's circle it with a red marker. But
3 to 5 years.
Hey, yeah, and it's in about a year or so, we're going to need to start talking about whatever complete network infrastructure overhaul. It's going to be, we're talking about a pretty significant investment. We can spread that out over 2 or 3 quarters, but I don't want to blindside you. Well, that does a couple of things. Number one, you're being professional. You are being a professional salesperson. You're leading them. You're not going to surprise them. No one likes to be surprised with a large project. But it also makes it tough for somebody from the outside to come out and wedge you and say, did you know all of your computers are 4 years old? You're going to have to replace them in a year. They're going to say, well, yes, Alex actually told me that. And we have a plan and we've got a process in place. And man, talk about being that salesperson. The wind totally gets sucked out of your sails and you're like, oh,
And you'll never have a better ally inside of one of your customers than the CFO if you delivered the CFO his budget for half of the business or a third of the business or whatever technology makes up, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of line items in technology, and if you can give them a clear and concise spend outline, you help that person immensely.
Yeah, totally agree. I like it. And the other thing you said is tell them what to spend. I think many MSPs are really reluctant to be directive and prescriptive and I'm just going to say bossy, but if you, I always encourage you to, when you're in the prospect seat, to look around at what is happening. So let's say you're at the doctor's office. They're not going to say, well, I don't know, maybe you might need some surgery. They're like, you need surgery. You need it tomorrow. Mary's coming in. She's going to coordinate it. Have a great day. And there is no permission to schedule surgery or permission to go do an x-ray. It is prescriptive because that doctor is very confident in their expertise. And so that would be my encouragement to MSPs is to stand in your greatness. Like, you know what they need. Tell them it's coming. Tell them it's what they need. This is why you pay me. This is why we have the VCIO line item in the contract, or the QBR line item in the contract, by the way, because that was a threat that I forgot to mention, is that if you have this in your contract and you're not delivering it and you're not even offering it, you are technically in breach of contract. I'm not an attorney, but you may want to tread carefully. And so tell them what to spend. That's what is on the screen. Tell them what to spend.
And I always like to point out to MSPs as we're talking through it, you don't have to tell them when to spend it, but you have to tell them what it costs.
Yes.
And if you lay out a budget, you can say, I need you to spend $10,000 to fix this problem. Does it fit this in here, or does it fit in here? And now I'm asking when, not if, you're going to spend the money. And that gets back to that human psychology piece you were talking about earlier, where we're no longer, we're playing to the strengths that we have, which are just understanding how humans operate. And if I give you a choice, you're more liable to pick one of the two choices I gave you and turn it on me and go, no, I'm not going to spend that money. Well, it's a whole different side of that coin. So with that, we're gonna turn the conversation just a little bit.
Well, I appreciate the analogy to the healthcare industry, because I also like to say, you want to have the conversation around IT as the health of IT and not the autopsy, right? So if you have these regular physicals, that's better than an autopsy when everything crashes and burns, right? It's sort of the same piece. So let me share this screen. So I suspect some folks on the call will want to have a chat with one or both of you. So I wanted to throw up how that could happen. So if you want to chat a strategy call with Jennifer, you can book one here. I forgot to mention, Alex, you can put in chat the info email, if you would, for Lifecycle Insights. And then what Lifecycle Insights does is automates that process. So if you're interested in a free trial of Lifecycle Insights, it's right on the pricing page. It's the basic plan, free for 30 days. And if when you get the welcome letter, you reply with like, I took a SWOT at QBRs, or I was on the call with Jennifer and Alex, or anything along those lines, so let us know you were here, someone on the team will get you a coupon code for once if you jump into the paying plan, to get you half off your first couple of months. So that's sort of the offer we're presenting. So Jennifer, do you want to talk a bit about like a strategy session, what that looks like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a system called the SMART system. And so on the strategy session, I actually walk you through my entire system for how I help MSPs grow. And you're able to walk off of that call and either execute it yourself. And SMART is an acronym. So we'll go through that whole acronym. If you go out to the webpage, mspsalesrevolution.com/SMART, I actually walk you through it. It's got a 5-minute video there. And then we have a conversation. And then if I'm able to help you, I'm able to help you. If you decide to execute on it yourself, that's awesome. I'll give you as many resources as I can. I'll tell you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. But literally at the end of that 30-40 minutes, you've got a very clear plan and a clear path to grow your MSP to wherever you want. And literally, some people don't want a $3 million MSP. They want a $400,000 MSP. And so I will help you get there. Some people never want to leave the tech role, but they'd like to work a sane 40 hours a week. other people would like to go on vacation for a week or two in a row without their team calling them or texting them or assigning tickets to them. And so it literally is customized. It is a mentorship where I only work with a very small handful of MSPs. I love what I do. I get to know your business very, very well. And you get access to myself and everything that I've been doing for years, as well as a team of subject matter experts that is always growing. So love to chat with anybody that's interested in that. I dropped the link in the chat because I have access to that. So I was like, I dropped it in the chat. Is that okay? Yes.
When I went off camera, I jumped again and like went and circled through Zoom, and it is just broken on their end. So my apologies for Zoom. And Alex, do you want to talk about, you know, what it looks like from your perspective on how you've helped some MSPs with their process?
Yeah, so Lifecycle Insights, you know, most of you know, it's a tool that was born out of necessity at my MSP over the last couple of years. And it really is a tool that there's nothing that we do in Lifecycle Insights that you can't do yourself, right? And you guys have heard this promise a million times. If you buy my product, I'll save you the cost of a human being. And then you realize that to buy the product that does all the automation, you have to have a human to tune the automation to make it all work. This is not that platform. This is a platform that puts some guide rails on what you do, allows you to build a repeatable, sustainable, scalable process to go out and do quarterly business reviews that matter, that don't get you mired in the mud, that get customers wanting to come back, and that will actually save you time in doing so. We've had partners tell us they were spending, I think for a while, the longest I had heard was 8 or 9 hours. And just the other day, somebody said 12 hours to prepare for a QBR. He's doing it on our platform in an hour and 45 minutes. And that's a long prep for a QBR on our platform. Most folks are an hour, hour and 15, hour and 20. They're getting them knocked out really, really fast. And they're delivering a much more quality presentation where their customer sees value, where it improves their relationship and just gets their customers more dialed in. And they're making 20, 30% margins additional on these clients. And every week, it seems like we hear about a customer who sold a $40,000 deal, an $80,000 deal. Somebody told us they sold a $150,000 project just because they had a QBR. So if you're not doing these things, you're leaving money on the table. We're here to help you make it, you know, streamlined, repeatable, scalable, so you can hand it off to someone else at your organization and just make this part of the process that it's like to work with your MSP.
Love it.
Perfect. Well, as we wrap up, thanks everybody for their time. We will send out the recording, absolutely, and along with the links. So, Jennifer, if you have any follow-up for everybody, feel free to ship it my way, and we'll make sure everybody has access to everyone. But thanks so much for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.